The UN Habitat Biennial Governing Council meeting was held in Nairobi with this year's theme being sustainable urban development and the role of cities in creating improved economic opportunities for all. I caught up with the delegates for more on the discussions. The role of youth and women in rapid urbanization and their contribution towards steering economic growth were the main issues in focus at the UN Habitat Governing Council Forum.
One of the defining features of this 21st century is the one that you have very rapid urbanization, which when you don't control it, it becomes chaotic and cities become slums. The other dimension of urbanization is that there's a huge rising population of young people. And as you can see with the Arab Spring, that was a clear manifestation of the growing importance of young people in the affairs of nations, societies, and communities.
If the cities are well planned and increase economical activity that this factor generates, it's enough to justify the effort of good planning. One of the things that the planning should guarantee, the urban planning should guarantee, is the guarantee of the mobility in the city, the capacity to move from one side of the other, because that increases the proximity of the factors of production, and that increases the productivity of the economy. Then a well-functioning city generates much more jobs than the one which is badly planned and it's always stuck in congestion and there's no facility. It's an estimation that a well-planned city can increase the number of jobs by 15% directly.
According to the 2011 Kenyan National Bureau of Statistics report, unemployment in Kenya stood at 40%, with 64% of this group being the youth, most of whom are involved in informal ventures, which if well tapped into could significantly contribute to economic growth.
The rising youth population speaks to different things. One, first is the sheer power and the innovativeness in young people that countries could harness. If they harness them, they benefit. Countries are growing, many countries are growing economically in terms of GDP per capita. But what you find is that while countries are growing, there's also a huge urban divide, in fact societal divide.
The white-collar jobs are no longer there. We shouldn't fool ourselves. But the most important part is for young people to also hunker down, to appreciate what skills they have and figure out what are the processes and what are the critical value chain, and understand that, get the right training. Government in terms of policy around the world should also engage young people, provide the enabling environment, the parameters, the policies that are youth-friendly, gender-friendly, and at the end of it, it's all about prosperity.
ICT currently stands out as one of the most exciting sectors that the youth are exploring, but other age-old trades like agriculture are slowly picking up.
The area that's not very exciting, but when you really dig deep into it, it is exciting, is agriculture. Most of our land across the world is fertile, and there's need to encourage young ambassadors to come into agriculture, to use their formal educational knowledge to bring it to bear in aggregating the yield that they'll produce and looking at the value chain of agriculture.
Women, on the other hand, are faced with several responsibilities which impede their contribution to economic development.
Women still play the triple burden. They do their reproductive work, they do their productive work, and they engage in communities. Yet, urban planning has not taken into account, in most cases, the different roles of women.
Access to finance still remains a key challenge for women, as most still play second fiddle to the men.
When it comes to economic empowerment, and you're looking at the women's access to resources, I mean productive resources, capital, the funds, the land, the property, even where most of the women are in the informal sector, poorly paid, and it is not easy for them to access capital.
Urbanization experts emphasize the role and importance of both these groups in the planning of cities in order to aid collective involvement within communities.
In terms of urban planning, women have a sense of how they plan their families in terms of, what makes sense for them. There are a lot of times when planning is done and there's no kind of discussion with communities about what happens. And so in a number of cases you find, in Jamaica, for example, you're finding in some communities houses that are empty, in cities where there are people really do need housing. And it's simply because in terms of planning, it is a good idea to sit down with people to say, this is what we're planning for you. How does this make sense for you? We've had instances in some countries where simple things like sanitation is planned without the input. And so the use that you intend it for, you really don't get it because it doesn't fit into the lifestyle of how people operate and work.
Going forward, with Kenya now going into a devolved governance system and with the emergence of modern cities like the Konza ICT Technopolis, these developments will help in decongesting already populated cities, while at the same time increase development traction of new urban cities.
We are very hopeful that this move that the Kenyan Constitution has done on creating the 47 counties and the governors, elected governors, that is going to attract political attention to the regional and county level administration. And of course, when you want to increase the urban planning, usually it's very difficult to do that from a very, in an office in the central government. It's much better to dialogue with the people and to do that at the local level, because then it takes ownership of the people, and then planning becomes more easy and also more enforceable. Because if it's something that comes from very far away and is not understood by the population, usually has a very serious problem of enforcement.